Welcome to tonight's podcast with Ryan Sean O'Reilly, David Wilkinson, and Richard Mell. This is There Is No Deodorant in Outer Space. Now, let's begin.
By the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this way comes. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of No Deodorant in Outer Space. I'm Ryan Sean O'Reilly, and with me as usual are my erstwhile cohorts, David Wilkinson.
Hello. Hi.
And Richard Mell.
Good evening.
This episode, we have a very special guest. John Doyle from the band I Decline, who also is the writer of our theme music. John, say hello.
Hey there, how is everybody?
John also goes by the nickname Dole, if so we don't get confused if anyone says Dole.
I don't want to be rude to everyone else, but this is by far our most special guest. That really is really great theme music. Thanks again. That it really is, it's pretty perfect. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Wilk. It's a pleasure to write some music for some sci-fi fans. It's a pleasure to be a part of this. This is really cool. I think what you guys are doing is great.
Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for making it better by giving us that music.
Sure thing.
Okay, well, John, why don't you just introduce yourself a bit in the sense that why don't you just tell us just real briefly your interest or background in science fiction and fantasy and that kind of stuff. Anything about that has to do with you. I mean, what's your favorite authors or directors or something like that?
Sure. Well, some of my favorite authors are Stephen King. I really like Stephen King's more sci-fi work, like Tommyknockers or The Dark Tower. Not so much his horror stuff, although I do like some of his horror stuff. On the sci-fi note, I'm really interested in sci-fi mixed with sort of very poetic and musical type of themes, like Michael Moorcock, who's a famous sci-fi author.
Oh yeah.
He wrote many lyrics and was a member of the psychedelic space rock band Hawkwind, which is I'm a huge fan of Hawkwind, so I really like that kind of music, and I really like a lot of comic book works. I like a lot of graphic novels, to be honest. I'm a fan of the X-Men, and just starting to get into. I see Guardians of the Galaxy is getting a lot of rave reviews. I really liked that film, and now I'm interested in checking out the graphic novels for that series. So,
have you ever read the Watchmen?
I haven't read that yet. A lot of people have told me a lot about it. I haven't had a chance to check it out.
That's the only one I've read.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And John, and you're a part of a lot of different musical groups, but one of the main ones is the band I Decline.
Yeah, that's right. I've been with those guys since 96, I think. That's when we started the band.
Okay. Well, welcome aboard. Hopefully you don't regret your time here. And hopefully we have a good discussion. So tonight's episode, we are going to be reviewing the work Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, and the movie Something Wicked This Way Comes that was directed by Jack Clayton and starred Jason Robards. So let's go around real quick, and everyone just kind of give us maybe an opening comment to set up your thoughts for the evening. Wilk, let's start with you.
I was sadly disappointed to read one of my favorite authors' novels and not like it.
Okay.
That was, yeah. I got more, but...
Interesting. Rick, Let's go to you.
Well, I enjoyed the book, and I enjoyed the movie as well. Reading the book was kind of like bringing me back to my fiction class, where I was reading kind of a lot of the... it was kind of like a survey class where we read a lot of American literature, but it reminded me most of the Romantic era with, Nathaniel Hawthorne and Washington Irving, where the level of detail was pretty rich, and I thought that Ray Bradbury kind of paralleled that quite a bit. Okay.
All right, I'll stop you there. Dole, any opening thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a lot of thoughts, but I'll just say some initial things. I remember the film, which I know we'll get to that, but I remember the film Something Wicked This Way Comes from my childhood quite vividly. It had a huge impression on me. I've always been very fascinated by the occult, and I thought that it was a really cool story back then. Never read the book, and then when you guys, invited me to to guest star on this on your program, and I had to read the book. I found it very very entertaining. I really liked the language. I think that Bradbury uses a lot of very musical language, and I'll point out some of the passages when we get to that. But that I really enjoyed. So
okay,
nice.
All right, and I'll just say, with Purpley Prose, Bradbury waxes nostalgic about the childhood boogeyman. It's a wonderfully creepy tale. So, of course, the story, as I just said, it was written by Ray Bradbury. Rick, why don't you give us a little bit of a bio and background on Bradbury?
I'll give you kind of like an outline of what the Wikipedia article says about him.
Don't say Wikipedia.
Why not? Well, okay. Ray Bradbury was born into a kind of like a poor family. His father was a lineman.
That's someone who works on railroads, right?
No, not at all.
No.
Someone who works on telephone poles, electric.
Oh, telephone. Okay.
Electric lines. Which is a very dangerous job, by the way. And I don't know, like, he probably wasn't in the union at that time since it was only the 1920s, so he was probably getting paid just a little bit, and it was also in the Depression, so they were struggling for sure. They had to move out of Waukegan for his dad to find additional work. He eventually found additional work in L.A., which made... Waukegan, he was in Waukegan until he was about 11.
Okay. And that's in Illinois.
Right, in Illinois, north suburb of Chicago. And a lot of his work, well, not a lot, but some of his work, including this book, With Something Wicked This Way Comes, kind of it revolves around the spirit of that small town that he knew that was once Waukegan. Mm-hmm. No more. It's just kind of like part of the urban sprawl of Chicago. Yeah, he was kind of between Waukegan and Tucson, Arizona after 33, and they finally moved to Los Angeles in 34. And when he moved there, he was ecstatic. He liked the fact that he was just kind of like in this pit of creativity. And one of the things that kind of made me chuckle was the fact that he would put on his roller skates and skate around Hollywood trying to find, all of the movie stars. He'd like skate over to the Brown Derby. He'd skate over to the MGM studios and just constantly
I
look
read that.
for... that's great.
He tried to get autographs, right? He was trying to get autographs and just see the stars.
Yeah, he ran into Cary Grant, Mae West. I just thought that was I got a kick out of that.
He said that he was like just so happy. They moved out there, and his dad I don't even know if he had a job. When we got a job, he was just so happy. He was just like a bright-eyed kid.
Right. So during this time, he's growing up. He made a lot of remarks about school and how it didn't really do anything for him, and a lot of his education came from just hanging out at the library. So he picked up a lot of the books back in his childhood that were kind of exciting. He was a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe, Edgar Rice Burroughs, an author we covered earlier.
Yeah,
correct.
Exactly.
Big fan of John Carter of Mars. Big fan of Tarzan of the Apes. He was into Robert Heinlein.
We also did it earlier.
Right. Arthur Clarke. Yep. A lot of the authors. Right.
Let me just stop you. Bradbury had as you just mentioned, he spent a lot of time in libraries. He didn't go to college. And I think I read somewhere that at some point in his life, he went to the library 3 times a week for the next 30 years. And so... 10 years, yeah. Yeah, and as a result, he sort of considered that that's where he got most of his education. And he spent, I think, the rest of his life very supportive of libraries. And I was just reading earlier tonight that the Waukegan Library here in Illinois, he, before his death, granted them permission to use his name to host an annual storytelling event every October. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he was just always supportive of libraries because of when he grew up, he didn't have money, he didn't go to college, and, he could go to the library for free and read all this great stuff. And that comes out in this book as well. But go ahead. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, he also donated his personal library to the Waukegan Library, which is interesting. It makes me want to kind of go there and visit, but he didn't only, read up on science fiction and fantasy writers. He was a big fan of like Shakespeare, Steinbeck, Thomas Wolfe. So he kind of flowered out as he got older. He attributed a lot of his success with writing to a couple of moments in his life. One where he went, I think his aunt took him to a play and it was The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And he was influenced by that. And another thing that he was influenced by was when he was at a carnival, there was an actual character at this carnival called Mr. Electrico, and he had this electric wand or sword, and he made contact with, he
knighted Bradbury.
Bradbury's nose, and he said, "Live forever." He screamed, "Live forever," and I guess the wand had that kind of effect on him, where it kind of raised his hair, and Ray was just so kind of enamored with the whole situation. It kind of turned something on inside of him, and he wrote every single day from that day forward, and really kind of every day,
every single day.
Wow. Hey, are you guys going to say anything interesting, or can I go right now? Because
go ahead. You're probably
terrible.
A bigger fan than I am. Go ahead.
I am. Well, let me tell you something about Ray Bradbury that I think really kind of sums up him in a nutshell. It's a really interesting fact that maybe you're going to get to or not, but he, in his entire life, never drove a car. He didn't believe in that. He also didn't want anyone else to drive a car. He
was kind of like a Luddite.
He did bicycles.
Well, he had a lot of quotes out there about how he just thought it was insane to strap yourself into a machine that's hurling forward. He hated computers. He thought Bill Gates was the ultimate con man.
He called those machines, too.
Not at first. At first, he didn't hate computers. He was supportive of computers. And then later on, he said there was too many computers.
And he was incredibly family-oriented. He dated one girl, his wife. They are married for over 50 years. They had 4 kids. But, I mean, if you look at his writings, and again, I really want to kind of juxtapose his novels with his short stories because I didn't like this long story of his. I mean, they're all about the future and technology. And if you look at these sorts of views, these aversions that he has, you can really see them come out in his writing, even in the book here tonight, too. And I mean, like, all of his stories have kind of, that I've read when I was young, have kind of stayed with me. I mean, they kind of form part of my psyche, the way I look at things, too. And this really wasn't that bad of a book. It just was very different than what I had high expectations that weren't met. But, but go on. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Rick, do you have anything else to add?
Not really. I was going to mention that he was somewhat of a Luddite, and I guess that was kind of like what Fahrenheit 451 was based on.
Oh, yeah. So he's the author of Fahrenheit 451, which is a hugely, immensely popular book. And he even has that on his tombstone, that he was the author of Fahrenheit 451.
Interesting. What else? I was going to bring something else up. Oh, just like his political leanings, I guess. He was a Democrat, and, not exactly left-leaning, but he decided that he would vote for Lyndon Johnson. Disappointed him for his handling of the Vietnam War. So that's kind of like what helped him convert to being a Republican. And he voted for Carter, but I guess according to Bradbury, Carter screwed up the economy so much he kind of never went back to being a Democrat. And he's considered by many political circles as being conservative, which is kind of odd, but I mean, the guy's had a long life,
Okay. Let me add that Bradbury, I think, befriended a lot of people, and he was part of that California writers group, I think, with Matheson and those guys. Matheson, who he did not too long ago. And I watched a later interview of his, where he talked about Rod Serling, the Twilight Zone guy, and I think some of Bradbury's stuff got turned into episodes on Twilight Zone. But he had a falling out with Rod Serling. He, early on, came to Bradbury's and said, I don't really know much about science fiction, and Bradbury brought him to his home and showed him like his library of all his books and stuff and said, you got to read this guy, you got to read this guy, you got to read this guy, Mathis and all these people. And then later on, when he was in the Twilight Zone, he was like, I guess Bradbury felt that Serling was harvesting from all these people and not crediting them, and they kind of had a falling out about it. And he said Serling had kind of forgotten that that's how he had...
he also had a falling out with the creator of the Addams Family, too. I mean, they were gonna make a whole... anthology about, the Addams Family, and what really came out of that was his book called Homecoming, or I think it was a short story, but it was about the Elliott family, and it was just about this nonconformist, family that resembled the Addams Family.
So sorry to interrupt, guys. So did Bradbury create the Addams Family? I wasn't aware of that.
No, I don't think he created it.
No, Addams Family was conceived by another guy. He did some cartoons for the New Yorker.
Yeah.
Kind of encapsulated the whole idea of the Addams Family, and then he started to collaborate with Ray Bradbury about it. But then they had a falling out.
And wasn't Bradbury giving him stories or something about some family that Bradbury knew or something?
Yeah, the Elliot family. That was his rendition of that.
Okay.
And he wrote a few stories about the Elliot family.
Dole makes a good point, because I'm zoning out too. So.
Okay, well, that's nothing new. So another thing I
thought you were a fan.
Another thing I want to point out about Bradbury is he makes a big distinction between science fiction and fantasy. And he, during his life, adamantly said that Fahrenheit 51 was a science fiction work that he did because of the fact that it could happen. Okay? And Something Wicked This Way Comes and some of his other stuff he considered fantasy, which he considered more like a myth and more like the ability to live forever. And it's probably important to note that when Bradbury was writing stuff, science fiction and fantasy was less accepted. And I kind of wondered if maybe that's why he didn't want to adopt the science fiction moniker. He didn't quite embrace it during his lifetime as he could have. Because, now science fiction fantasy is a lot more mainstream than it was back then. And, back then you write science fiction and people would say it's good, but it's still science fiction. Well, there was a prejudice. Well, there was a prejudice against genre fiction. Back then.
He was literally on top of his game for 60 years. He was renowned for being a science fiction writer. How you can say he didn't embrace it? That's what he was known for. He had success at a very early age and a steady stream of work well into his 80s. I mean, he's known as a science fiction writer. I mean, he didn't shy away from it.
I think he did.
Now, now
didn't consider himself a science fiction writer though.
He's a contemporary writer. But now.
My point
he's been dead that long.
My point is he didn't consider himself a science fiction writer, like Rick just said. He kind of didn't really. It seemed like he didn't really totally love that term.
Well, he's dead anyways. I mean, he's a science fiction writer. Let's move on.
I'm not saying he isn't or he's not. I'm just pointing out something that he was going on with him. Another fun.
Go
ahead.
I just thought it was kind of interesting that a lot of his work was extremely popular in communist Russia.
Oh, fun fact for Wilk. Wilk, do you know who another famous writer who published one of Bradbury's, I think maybe his first story in after it was rejected somewhere else. I think he published it in Mademoiselle magazine. But this guy was just an intern or something at the time and found Bradbury's story in the slush pile and published it. Do you know who that was?
No.
Truman Capote.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
He sort of discovered Bradbury. I thought that was kind of interesting. Another thing, probably the final fact I have here is
another Wikipedia nugget.
Yeah, little nugget. Another little fun fact I saw was that Ray Harryhausen was his best man, and he was good friends with him throughout his life. Ray Harryhausen was a famous special effects guy in Hollywood back in the day, and he
great name. That is a great name. Can you say it again?
He's the guy.
What's his? Say the name again.
Ray Harryhausen.
Ray Harryhausen.
It's a great name.
He created Clash of the Titans in the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and all that kind of stuff. And for the longest time, people couldn't even figure out how that guy did that stuff.
Who cares? I just like his name, Ray Harryhausen.
Okay. Anyone else have any comment about Bradbury?
Make love to me like my name's Ray Harryhausen.
Yeah, I guess he died as a Tea Party supporter, which is interesting.
It's awesome.
He's just a confused old man, I think, but who knows?
Oh, I don't know if he was confused, but I think he's got numerous awards and presidents accoladed him.
Did the Tea Party support him? I mean, I really let's not kill.
Sure, they did.
Bradbury. He's a Tea Party guy. What the fuck?
Yeah,
I found some booze. Good news. So go on.
Okay. All right.
What?
So then that'll conclude our discussion about Bradbury. So. Let's talk about the work itself. So, Wilk, why don't you give us just a quick synopsis of Something Wicked This Way Comes?
Quick synopsis of Something Wicked This Way Comes. It focuses on two boys who are on the cusp of being teenagers and their encounters with a traveling carnival, a dark carnival that comes to town, and their adventures and experiences with this carnival. And ultimately, it leads to a pretty horrific end for a few people and a pretty ridiculous ending for others.
Okay, that's one way to summarize it. So the story it's almost like a coming of age story, and
oh Christ,
it's a part of, I guess Bradbury later termed his Greentown trilogy because he calls the town Greentown. It was based on Waukegan, where he grew up, and there's two other books that he wrote in this setting, and also a collection of short stories. Dole, how did you feel about the the voice of the characters. The main protagonists are two boys, and they're, I don't know, like 12 years old or something like that. Did you feel that it was realistic? Their behaviors, their thoughts. What did you think about that?
For small town America, small middle class white America, yes, I think so. Especially from those times, I think that when was this book written? It was like back in like the
60s?
40s. Oh, was it that soon? It seems to me like it's definitely from a different time. You know, there's no cell phones, there's no laptops or anything like that. So you have these two boys that are running around and trying to entertain themselves in whatever way possible, which you don't really see that much of nowadays. You know, you got kids stuck in front of the TV all the time. So it harks back to my childhood. I remember not having anything to do and having to find stuff to do, and you know, sneaking out of the house and running all over the neighborhood. So
buying lightning rods and like being in love with another boy and talking to your dad about aging at the library and your breathless experiences with your best friend. You're like, I'm so worried about you. Yeah. It was like nothing that ever happened in any boy's life. It didn't
not in your life, Will.
Not in my life. Not
in Will's
your
jaded life.
I mean, even what Dole just said, it's like it harks.
I had good friends when I was young,
man. I had
man.
friends when I was young too, but this is one of those boy love stories where an author romanticizes childhood to the
I had
point
fun
that it's
with
ridiculous.
my friends, and I did love my friends. I still do. What's wrong with loving your friends?
Okay,
I disagree with Will.
No
I
one
have to
doesn't
totally
love
disagree.
their friends.
Let's hear. Will, go ahead. Let me hear.
Yeah,
let's hear your
seriously.
I read this. Okay, some authors occasionally romanticize boyhood to the point that it makes me want to put my head through a wall. Like, it's this breathless admiration of all things childhood, where they talk about the smell of the air and, it's to be a boy fancy and free running through the woods. You know, I mean,
So while these guys were climbing trees, you were kind of like, you were the other guy, or the other boy that was kind of like smoking a cigarette and, you know, reading the Playboy magazine.
I was doing all these things, but all these other boys in my childhood were completely interchangeable. I don't think I actually formed a emotional bond with a human being until they started just having some kind of self-deprecation. Because boys are just doing boy things. There's really not any emotional depth or context to being a boy.
We're still wondering when you're going to form a bond with another actual human being.
Well,
another human being.
Yeah. It's so overdone.
Okay, so you had problems with the tone of the story and all that. Rick, you're disagreeing with that. Why do you disagree with that? You had a different childhood. You actually could relate to people. Why do you disagree?
Yeah, I actually had some friends that, you know, and it's not about, like, relating to a friend is as simple as just sharing an experience, whether it be imaginative or something that, you know, makes you laugh, you know, kind of experiencing. No, it's just as simple as that. It's just sharing a moment. It doesn't really need to be, you know, kind of picking out with cookies or, you know, watching cartoons together. It's really kind of, you know, sort of one-on-one. It's communicating, and it's simple as that. Whether
that sentence you just said means nothing.
You know, some laughter comes out of it, or, you know, some understanding, or
okay. So with regard to the book, you felt it was not. You could relate to the tone.
I could relate to it. It wasn't over the top for me.
Okay, Dole, did you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I totally disagree with Wilk's sentiments, but, you know, whatever. Everyone had a different childhood, but I think one of the things that Rick said, well, one of the things that Rick brought up, which I thought was interesting, he talked about this thought of things that people share, you know, and that's the basis of, you know, human interaction. Well, I think, to me, I didn't get that this was a coming of age story at all. I don't really feel that. I understand where you could get that, but I think the real gist of the story is the father, and also his way and his method of defeating the evil. And he talks about, like, there's a point, I think it's on my book, it's page 176. He talks about common cause and, like, how, you know, why is it important to, you know, the things he talks about. Why love a woman?
Hold on. Let me set this up. So the father in the story is older. He's like 54 or something like that. And so the two boys are a lot younger. And the struggle with the father in this book is that he's feeling his age, and his son's friend seem to be reminding him of how old he is. And he's kind of, the whole struggle with him is, I'm so old. I don't fit in with everyone here. But okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a point in the story where he's trying to help Jim and, his son Will's best friend Jim and Will, his son, to try and come up with a way to defeat Mr. Dark and Mr. Cougar, the evil carnival, I guess, caretakers or whatever. And he has this really nice passage where he talks about love in a way that I think is really poetic, and he also is talking about essentially what is love? Like, why do we love people? It has nothing to do with just because of how they look or how they feel. It's because we share something with them.
He spoke of the senses.
Something that they do reminds us of ourselves. Like, he says, her ears hear music that I might sing half the night through. So that's why I love her ears, because she hears something that I like myself. And, and her tongue likes the taste of peach and mint and all that. And I like that because she likes that. I like to hear her speak, things like that. I think that he's talking about common cause, and that's essentially the gist of what he uses to defeat the evil is finding a way to tap into the love of his son and his son's best friend. So I thought,
okay.
I think the story is really about friendship.
Okay.
I'm ready to explode. Can I talk about everything you just said?
Well,
sure.
Please.
Go ahead.
No, just give me.
Go ahead.
That premise there, and this is not a slam on Dole or nonsense to enjoy the story, but like the whole central premise of how love conquers all is such bullshit. And that's why I'm saying the whole thing is bullshit. It's this romanticized view of childhood because love does not conquer all. Laughter doesn't make evil go away. You need to kill people to make them go away.
No, it is fiction, Wilk.
Fuck that. It's a story. It's a horrible metaphor. It sends a wrong lesson. It does. Love does not conquer all. Love doesn't
saying
do
it is
shit.
fiction. It's a nice story. It's got a good ending.
It's not a nice story because, to me, that's where I'm saying it's the romanticized childhood thing. It's very simple. It's like one step below or above clapping your hands to save Tinkerbell if you believe in fairies. It almost breaks that wall of narration where I felt like the dad's laughing, he's conquering this carnival with love. It's a cop-out. It's a cheap way. It's anticlimactic. There's other authors, Stephen King for one, who's actually probably inspired by this. He has several stories that are in the same vein, like Needful Things. That sort of thing.
He definitely was inspired by Bradbury.
Absolutely. And I am too. I love Bradbury. I'm just saying, I felt this is an extrapolation of a really good story that he wanted to make into a movie, which is what happened here. And he added a bunch of ham-fisted narration that doesn't fit with the core of the story here. But like, when love conquers all and stop, that's the wrong message, because it doesn't. These kids should be dead. Their father should be buried with them with a stupid grin on his face with a lightning rod put through his heart. If you wanted to make the story any good, the lightning rod salesman, seriously, the lightning rod salesman should have been the hero. He should have been some kind of archangel that came to town and put a lightning rod over the chosen child's house to protect him from the evil, and they used that lightning rod to put a fucking hole in Mr. Dark's heart. That's how the story should have ended. Instead, there's all this bullshit laughing and clapping. Oh, love conquers all. It doesn't conquer all. I'm like, this is a bullshit story. It's a bullshit ending.
Well, let me stop you there. All right, you're getting repetitive. Okay.
Sorry.
So let me bring in another point. So another thing that I thought that was done well with this book is I felt that Bradbury had a very good way of making this carnival creepy. The scenes he describes, which are not like a Stephen King story where they're very graphic and stuff, but he describes these kids being up late at night and seeing a train arrive at like 3 a.m, and then this carnival being constructed in the middle of the night, and they go sneak out of their houses and go look at it.
The whole 3 a.m. thing too.
And yeah, and there's other scenes where there's this witch, and I think does he say her eyes are sewed shut and stuff like that? And
yeah, she was creepy. That was creepy.
Yeah, the way he describes her fingers moving as she's trying to look at them, and she comes to spy on them in like a hot air balloon, and there's this whole thing where. But yeah, there was a really great scene where this hot air balloon comes and Will, the main protagonist, has to like fend it off on the rooftop of one of the houses in the middle of the night, and I just thought just all the carnival characters were really creepy in a way.
Absolutely. But if you remove the context of the rest of the story, the separate characters almost stand. I really felt like it was a combination of other elements from other stories. Well, the Illustrated Man, definitely, that's one. But I mean, like, these were all creepy characters that could have existed on their own. They had their own little stories, and it's almost like it wanted to be an anthology, but he put this stupid meat of a story in there about Laffy McJackass old man fucking dad, and it ruined the story for me.
Look,
man. Those were all good elements.
Now, Wilk, you said you turned us on to the fact that this originally started off as a short story called Dark Ferris?
Yes. Yeah.
Or Black Ferris. And it was published in, it looks like Weird Tales in, 1948. And it was a very, very, very short story, only just like 5 or 6 pages. part of the elements in that short story are like straight in this novel. And so did you feel like Bradbury had like a good short story and then he kind of just put too much filler in to make a novel?
He did. Well, did you read the story? It was originally going to be who was the actor that he was working with?
Gene Kelly.
Gene Kelly. Gene Kelly was buddies with him probably from the whole George Burns days, and he liked the story, wanted to make the movie, so he turned to an 80-page treatment, as they say in the biz, and he couldn't get it sold, so they turned it into a novel. But yeah, I mean, he took a good premise, I think, and he added stuff to it for the sake of making a horrible movie, which they made, and then he turned it into a horrible book.
Well, but that when Gene Kelly got the script, he couldn't get financing for it, so that was never made.
No, I know. Then he had added 80 pages. I mean, it's not the story itself. I mean, if you make an 80-page script, you probably add in extra things in there.
Right.
I mean, I think the central premise of the short story was the Ferris wheel that goes back in time, ages doesn't age, and really that whole concept of aging on it's pretty cool. It's a good thing, and the way that they kill the person, it's very like it. Well,
let's explain that. And just a real quick side note: Gene Kelly, who is the actor from Singing in the Rain, and Singing in the Rain was integral scene that song was an integral scene in Clockwork Orange, which we reviewed in the previous episode. But okay, so the Ferris wheel you're talking about in this novel, it's a carousel, a merry-go-round. And what it is, and it's essential to the whole plot, is that if someone rides this carousel and goes backwards, then each time they go around, like they lose an age of their life. So it's almost like a fountain of youth kind of thing, where you can go backwards or forward, and it'll affect your age. And so that's a central theme to this. And so, Rick, what did you think about that device in the book and how it fit with everything?
The device is just kind of like a metaphor for advancing your vain desires to be more beautiful, be stronger, older, more mature, and it was just sort of there to realize all of these, desires. So it would sort of play on everyone who was just sort of unhappy with their current situation and kind of drive people nuts. So that's what that was.
Okay.
I thought it was interesting. I know we haven't talked about the movie, and I know we will, but since you brought up the device, I found it interesting that although they do use the carousel in the movie as well, I thought it was interesting in that short story how they used a Ferris wheel instead of the carousel, and also how in the movie, the scene when Mr. Dark is in the library, he also uses the metaphor of the book. I thought it was just kind of cool, those devices. Personally, I preferred the Ferris wheel more than the carousel. I thought that was more kind of cooler and more sinister than a carousel, and I thought he should have stuck with that metaphor, in my opinion. Personal preference. But
and switching gears, one other thing I think is a sort of a major part of this discussion is that Bradbury's style of writing, he uses very poetic words, very flowery. You would describe it as purple prose, is the term people would say. So you can contrast that to an author who does, I think the author Brandon Sanderson, who I like, has described the contrast to be like writing as like a window pane, where window pane writing would be like your words do not get are see-through. When the reader reads the words, there's nothing there to stop the reader from getting right to the heart of the story. Bradbury's words are very metaphorical, lyrical. It's like looking through stained glass. You're not. There's a story there, and Roger Ebert pointed that out in this book or in the movie. And Bradbury has these very suspenseful scenes, solid scenes where the kids are running after someone and they get accused of a crime, and there's all these like kind of reversal of fortunes and stuff. So the story is there, but it's somewhat behind Bradbury's lens, which gets more allegorical, more metaphysical in description. And I think, Wilk, you would say you didn't like that aspect of that. Do you feel that way?
It's hard. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I didn't like the overall story that they crammed around the meat, I guess. I mean,
so it wasn't the words themselves?
No, the word. I mean, I feel like we're breaking this down to a metaparticle level. I mean, I like words. I like letters.
Okay. A lot of people online, I was looking at reviews the other day, and some people didn't like that because they felt it made the work more dated, and they didn't like the wordiness of it and stuff.
Ryan,
what did you think?
Okay, here's my impression. You've written some good short stories that I've liked, that my wife has liked, and I can't speak for anyone else. And I've liked some of your short stories. I feel like if somebody told you to take this short story and turn it into a 300-page book, and you had to because there's a gun to your head or a bag of money, it'd be a piece of shit story. And that's what I kind of feel this Ray Bradbury story is. I'm like, this is kind of a shitty story, but you tried to make it something good real long. The core material doesn't beget this kind of story, and I think he had some shit on his mind, which, maybe whatever, we're all getting old, gonna die, all that nonsense, and he worked into the story, but it just seemed, I don't know, I mean, like, was there ecstasy back in the 40s?
Yeah, you know what? Well, he did turn 40, he did turn 40 when he started writing this book.
Well, Rick, what did you think about the actual lyrical quality of the writing of the prose itself?
Holy shit, I loved it. This is what writing is all about. You should pack it in. I mean,
I agree.
It's a joy to be able to.
I agree too. I agree with all you guys. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Read this stuff and read it twice and have it sort of mean something different the second time you read it. It's not supposed to be just so easy and accessible. You're supposed to work at it.
Listen to this passage, Rick. Sorry to interrupt, Rick, but listen to this passage, and this grabbed me right away. This is chapter 3. He says, he's describing, what is he talking about? About the friendships, right? And the kids running around and stuff. He says, why are some people all grasshopper fiddlings, scrapings, all antennae, shivering, one big ganglion, a turtling nodding, slip nodding, square nodding themselves? There's all this, like, sibilance. He's using the S sound constantly, and it's like,
yes,
it's very poetic to me. I mean, I picked up that right away, and it makes you feel like you're hopping along the grass. To me, I mean, I dig that stuff.
Right. It gives you that tactile feeling.
He's a good writer. I just didn't like the story. The writing's great. I like his writing style. I just didn't like the story.
So your criticism was more with the story itself rather than the prose.
Ultimately, I think the story triumphs all and everything. I mean, the writing style comes second. Like, okay, last month, Terry Pratchett, fantastic writer. He actually could do a shit story, but his writing style, to me, is just so humorous. The story could be about nothing, and in this case, it's about a goddamn post office, and I'd probably be all over it. Yeah, Bradbury, it was lyrical. He does have a nice prose story to him, but ultimately, he's a story-driven author, and I thought his story was weaker. I like Bradbury for the story.
Okay, I can see how you make your point there. The story is about good and evil. All right, I think it doesn't really go any deeper than that. People's desires kind of get out of hand, and we're not talking about like ideal characters here, like you're alluding to. I think Charles Halloway's got a dark side to him.
That's the father.
Yeah, that's the father, and the boys. The one boy, Jim Nightshade. He's got a dark side to him. He's raised by a single mother. He's always kind of needing something more, so
that was a dark side. I didn't get that either. I didn't get why. Yeah, they kept alluding to his dark side. I'm like, what? His dad's not around? It sounds like his dad's an asshole. Why does that reflect poorly on him?
That wasn't why he was saying Jim Nightshade had a dark side. I think he always was alluding that Jim was a little more edgy, a little more daring than Will. Will was a lot more cautious. They're going by some kind of house of ill repute or something like that. And Jim is the kid that wants to look in the window, and Will's like, "Let's go home. We should go home."
Well, I feel like that's how people felt about me as a kid. I was the crazy one, but fuck them.
But I think that goes to the story, and you're saying that this is you were saying earlier, Wilk, that this story is so unrealistic, but I think that's very realistic. I mean, growing up in a group of friends, there's always one kid that's a little bit more
risky.
Yeah, risque or more worldly than another kid, and I think Bradbury shows a nice contrast to these two kids who are the best of friends and might be carbon copies of each other, except they're not quite. And how that friendship balances out and stuff. So I think that was a plus of the book, and that made it more realistic. Okay. Any other final comments about the book, or is that where we're at?
They should have killed some kids. I think it would have been a better book. No, I'm serious. I think Stephen King would have killed off some kids here to make it real.
He would have.
Some of the scenes in here, you can clearly see that some of the scenes Stephen King loved, like the scene where the two boys are in the sewer and looking up at this carnival passing by. I mean, that's Stephen King. I mean, King could totally love that. I mean, look at It and all that stuff that he wrote.
But I'm saying it adds the horror element in there that I think is necessary for this kind of stuff to make it seem real to me. I don't know.
Okay.
So the death of Mr. Dark as the boy at the end, it didn't really do it for you, or what?
It honestly kind of pissed me off, the death of the boy at the end, because I felt like it was a weak way to. I would have been happy if they killed him, like physically, torn him apart, done something to him.
Yeah, that was more kind of like a fantastical death than it was. Yeah.
To be honest, Dole's kind of selling me on the whole lyric. I mean, if you look at this as almost as a work of prose as opposed to a story, then I guess it kind of makes more sense. And no, seriously,
that's what hooked me right away. Yeah. That's really what hooked me right away was the lyrical quality of the story. I mean, I look at some of the stuff. Right. I mean, there was something I was digging through before we started talking, and like when he's talking about the carousel as like a roulette wheel, I thought that's really cool. And he's talking about. He describes humans, different characters throughout with animalistic qualities. At one point he's talking about Jim like he's a dog, like when they're in Miss Foley's house and he's outside and he's kind of whimpering under his breath, and there's just a bunch of stuff in here that like totally hooked me because I'm like, wow, that's so cool that he's looking at these scenes and these characters very lyrically and very he used a lot of metaphor, a lot of characteristic description.
Yeah, it's the kind of book that I just wish I had a little bit more time to read, just so I can kind of.
Well, I may have approached it too literally.
Reflect on it a little
honesty.
bit. Yeah.
I mean, like Bradbury stories to me have always been very. I mean, they've been very short, they're like a nice punch in the gut. I mean, they're shocking. They're great sci-fi. They're great horror. Someone usually dies.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so then let's move on to the movie Something Wicked with This Way Comes that was directed by Jack Clayton. Wilk, you're going to give us a little background about this director.
Yes, Jack Clayton. He made the version of The Great Gatsby, one of the worst fucking books to ever be lauded as a classic. It spawned nothing but terrible movies.
The one with Robert Redford or what?
Maybe. I don't know. The 74 version one.
You don't sound like you care. Yeah, Redford,
dude, okay. Have you guys ever liked The Great Gatsby in any form? In my younger, more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice. I've been trying ever since then. Fuck you.
I read it with my wife. We enjoyed it together. It was nice.
I have to agree with Wilk here. I hate that book, and I hate every single iteration of that movie as well.
Drives me crazy. Every 10 years, they got to make another movie. They're like, it's The Great Gatsby. It's the best book ever.
Do you know why the movie was made? I mean, it's a Disney production. What was the impetus for the movie? Was it always supposed to be a movie from the book,
Clayton,
or what?
I know this. Okay, he was born in England, and he made some important films, at least in England, in the beginning. He made the room at the top or something like that, which got some early accolades for him. And then later in his life, I think he struggled more, and he went a long time period without actually making movies. When he finally got back into it, Something Wicked with This Way Comes was one of the movies that he did, and I think he didn't have a lot of success with this movie and the other movies that he came up with later in his life. I think he tried to be more choosy. He was a big fan of cinema in itself, but I don't know that it worked out for him. He was a big fan of this book, and he wanted to make this movie for a long time. It was sort of a cherished project for him, and when he actually did make it, I think Bradbury was involved in writing the script. This was a Disney production. Disney made this movie. And then there started to be a disconnect between Bradbury and this director, Clayton, because Clayton wanted to make it more friendly, and maybe he got pressure from Disney to do that, but Bradbury wanted to stick with the script, and you can see that in the final product. They do cut out a lot more of the dark elements and sort of just smooth over it. In the end, Bradbury, I think, got insulted because Disney pushed for Clayton to have someone do a final rewrite. And they brought in someone, I think, from England to do a rewrite, and Bradbury, I don't know if he walked away. Disney ended up doing like $5 million of changes. They kept changing and screwing with this movie over and over again. They had some first-of-its-time computer effects in this movie.
They cut out.
Yeah, that they ended up cutting out, and they're not even using, which kind of makes me wonder what was that?
And actually, the most interesting part of this movie, too, is how to get it, because if you guys have young kids, though I don't know if you do or don't, I know Rick does, Disney films, every kid knows about Disney films. Disney really keeps a lock on their products. Like, I'm trying to get Ichabod Crane, Sleepy Hollow right now. You can't get that anywhere. This movie is only available on DVD through Amazon. You can't download it. You can't get it on YouTube.
Yeah.
But, like, I would love to see a director's cut of these scenes, but it's fucking Disney. And like, they kind of lock these things down. They have this weird little system here. And the films that, I mean, I feel like I'm the only person here that doesn't remember this movie. My wife remembers it from when she was a girl.
I remember
Do
it.
you guys remember this?
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember liking it. And another thing that I thought was interesting that I learned was that one of the reasons Disney put this movie out is because of the success of The Dark Crystal and some other movies at the time, which were more adult orientated. And Disney wanted to break free of just their kid friendly movies. And so
yeah, Buena Vista was their first production company that was not kind of like the Magic Kingdom, Disney cartoony shit. So
this was their attempt to be a little bit more darker. And in the end, I guess it failed because I don't think this movie was a commercial success, at least back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was looking up on YouTube trying to find an interview of Ray Bradbury regarding this book and film, and I just happened upon an interview when he was very late in his life talking about the film and talking about a little bit about what you guys discussed here about the whole disagreement he had with Clayton and all that stuff. And apparently, according to him in that interview, Disney actually brought him back in very late in the game to save the film because they did a test screening of it, and it just fell really flat. And then he had to come in and he actually added some stuff. I think if I remember correctly, I think he added some sort of narration into it. And, it just tied it together.
And they did the ending. Roger Ebert loved it, which is interesting. And
I loved
basically, well, you know what? It was pretty faithful. It caught the spirit of the book. But, I thought Dole made a really good point earlier when he said this is more of a work of prose, which if I look at it as a work of prose, I actually like it better than thinking of it as a novel telling a story. But it did kind of capture the feeling and moods of the book, which I didn't really like.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. The tone, but they cut out a lot of
the
stuff.
tone. Yeah, exactly. No, but the narration and honestly, the first 5 minutes, I just kept thinking of a South Park parody where they're talking about hey, the warm, crisp sun. I mean, it was kind of over the top, but it really did kind of capture that sense of the opening of the novel too. I don't know. I mean, I didn't think it was a terrible film. Again, just a terrible story. That's where I kind of disconnected.
Well, Rick, why don't you just give us a brief synopsis of the film and how it was different than the book?
Yeah, the film kept the premise of the book pretty well, like you said. I thought there were some notable differences. There's a consistent filter that I see with all these films that are adapted from the books, and that's that they take these characters who Charles Halloway, for example, in the book was the janitor of the library who was actually pretty well read and familiar with the entire, collection in the library, and was a really good influence with Will, his son, and his friend Jim. And they take that from the book and they make him into this polished librarian and village patriarch in the movie. And I get so frustrated with this.
It's like I Am Legend.
Because it's like I Am Legend. It's like Running Man too.
Yeah.
This is a consistent filter. It makes me sick. People can come from nowhere and become something. I don't know why movies keep doing this where, these people need to be established and sort of like these more polished characters. It's a much more beautiful story if there's trial and tribulation and there's growth, and movies just choose not to illustrate any of that.
Well, and then every sitcom, every movie, the main character always has a house that's worth $700,000 too. That always drives me crazy. It's like
what? Say that again, Wilk. Go ahead.
I feel like in every major movie or every TV show, the normal characters, these middle class people, have houses that are like $700,000. It's like they always have these. It's like Home Alone. It's like, we're going to Paris with our 7 kids. You are?
Yeah. It's no thing. Like it's a fucking normal thing, right?
Yeah. Hollywood in general has, and really, there's a lot of new movies coming out right now that, with the shoestring budgets you can do, I think I try and post on Facebook when I see a cool one on Netflix. So I saw one called The Dirties, where these guys made it with digital cameras. Kevin Smith distributed it, but better movies are coming out. They're getting a little bit grittier. I think I have hope they can remake some of these things and be truer to the story, because the way that content is put out there now, it's a freer market. I mean, I can't tell you. Yeah.
Does anybody I agree totally with what Wilk's saying. I don't know if anyone was planning on touching on this, but does anybody else feel annoyed with the whole backstory of Will almost drowning and the father not saving him and that whole? I thought that was really annoying and totally killed the story for me.
I saw that they did that to make the father feel weak, which he does feel weak in the book. And
right. I thought it just helped to illustrate his feelings toward himself, and it was a nice little kind of convenient backstory to include without going into a lot of the nuances of the book.
I felt like it was I felt like it was more of what you're talking about, though, Rick. More of like making it way Hollywood and polished. Like, there's got to be a reason that he feels weak and detached from his son, rather than just maybe he just feels like, I'm getting old and I can't go out and play anymore.
You're right, John, because the whole book is about temptation and dealing with. And the father's temptation is feeling old. And that's why he's tempted by the carnival to become young again. And at some point he has a penultimate scene with Mr. Dark, the leader of the carnival, who offers him to reverse his age. So we don't need him to feel weak about not saving his boy and doing all these things. We just need him to feel old because that's his struggle. And so in that sense, I saw why they did it for the movie, and it sort of fits. But they don't really need it because they just need to focus on him just feeling old.
I think the movie also illustrated a little bit better the tobacconist or the tobacconist's desires and the barber's desires. And the barber had a desire for women, and the tobacconist had a desire for money. And the movie kind of made that a little bit more plain for the consumer. You hardly got any mention of these characters in the book. The movie just kind of underscored the fact that there's a whole lot of want going on in this little town, and the carnies were coming to sort of prey on all of this. So it kind of elucidated all of that, which I appreciated.
Yeah, I thought that was cool that they added those characters. That definitely helped. I also thought that was cool how I thought that the scene where the Dust Witch attacks Jim's house with the spiders, which was much more intense to me than the whole balloon scene. I thought the balloon scene was, I understood the premise of it, and it was cool to see the fight the struggle he had with the Dust Witch there.
In the book? Yeah,
but I kind of thought it was more effective and more thrilling for the two boys to kind of huddle up in the one house and try and escape, and also them tying in the lightning rod into the scene as well. I felt like that Ray missed the boat there in the book.
Yeah, I do agree. In the book, they set up it opens with this lightning rod salesman who's a very interesting character who something bad befalls him, and Bradbury doesn't really wrap that guy up as much as the movie does. However, the Dust Witch in the movie is played by Pam Grier, and I feel like, she did not have the creepiness that I felt in the book. And I disagree with you, John, about the balloon scene, which is, I understand what you're saying. It's a lot more creepier to have these tarantulas and spiders invading the boy's room and them freaking out. It's a lot more dramatic. It's a lot more Hollywood. Bradbury doesn't do that. He has this kind of weird scene where the Dust Witch comes in on this balloon in the middle of the night, and he has to fight this balloon. And it's a really strange and kind of odd scene, but I really felt it at the time when I read it. Yep. And I don't know how you pull that off in a movie, but
you can't pull that off in a movie.
Maybe you can't. Maybe that's a good point. But to me, sometimes I don't like when Hollywood takes that overdramatic step. Because I feel like it's just, like, I'm sick of cliffhangers. Everyone doesn't have to fall off the cliff and be holding on by their fingertips. I've seen so many times, I'm done with it. So, that's how the spiders are to me.
I kind of thought it was interesting. It's interesting, the whole balloon scene, because I feel like there's traces of that sort of in another sci-fi carny kind of film, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And I
think that
I kind of feel like they took a little bit from that. I think they took a little bit of that from this
maybe.
film. And it's interesting to me, but I almost feel like this is one of the first carny films. There's another one called Freaks, which is a black and white film. I think it's from the 50s or so. But there's this seemed like the first of many in a long list of, the evil carnival coming to town films. But I always felt like this one kind of was the best one out there, or the most unique one out there.
Well, all right, let's stop there, and let's just say any final comments about the book and movie. Rick, I'll go to you.
I just enjoyed it. I wish I had more time to kind of consume it, but I got other things going on. But yeah.
Well, that's life. Wilk,
yeah.
What about you? Final comments?
You know what? Dole kind of won me over. I don't hate the book as much as I thought I did. I look at it more as a piece of prose as opposed to a literal novel. It isn't that bad, and maybe my own biases and predilections have biased me into liking it. So I'd ask everybody to kind of ignore me and check it out.
Dole, go ahead.
Sure. Basically, I'm excited about it. I enjoyed the heck out of it, both the book and the movie. And I think one of you mentioned that they might be doing a remake. I would like to see them take another crack at the film. Although I did, nobody really talked about Jonathan Pryce in this film. I really liked him a lot. I thought his performance was awesome as Mr. Dark.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll say I like the book. I think it was good. I would recommend to read it. I think it's a very good sort of struggle of good and evil. In Bradbury's, he's got a great lyrical style that's worth checking out. I loved the movie when I was younger. Watching it now, I don't love it as much. It's interesting to check out and see. But you're right, John. I did see that. I think as of this year, Graham Smith came out and said that he was going to be doing a remake of this. I think he recently did Dark Shadows, the movie Dark Shadows. Which I didn't actually see that.
Is that the one with
Johnny Depp?
Johnny Depp. I said it was terrible.
Yeah. Well, he's talking about redoing this, and he said he doesn't want to redo the original movie. He wants to go back to the source material and make it more like the book. So if that gets off its feet and makes it could be interesting to check it out and see if they are more faithful to the book. If it does stay truer to the creepier side of it that Disney kind of shied away from. So that'll be interesting to check out. Dole, you want to plug your website for your band or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. You can check out I Decline at www.i-decline.com. You can also check out, hit me up on the web at Facebook/I Decline.
And I Decline is, what kind of music would you describe it briefly?
Sure, it's sort of stoner rockish, similar to like bands like Caius or Queens of the Stone Age, with a touch of psychedelic space rock like Hawkwind or Monster Magnet, kind of in that realm.
Cool.
I'll vouch. They're great live. I've never seen a bad live I Decline show. I haven't seen as many as Ryan, but I've probably been to 12 or 15 over the years, and they've all been great.
Always a good time.
Thanks.
Really, honestly, I think it's hard. I mean, not to get too bogged down, who's in the lineup right now, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's myself. Dan Dominiak's been in the band for.
And you play the drums.
I play the drums. That's right.
And backing vocals.
I write a lot of material too, and I do all the production. We've got Dan Dominiak, who came from more of an indie rock band called 40 Piece Choir.
Okay.
He plays lead guitar, and then we've got Mike Pesavento, who's been with me since the start of the band. He and I are the two remaining, I guess, original members. He plays rhythm guitar. We've got David Kohut on bass guitar, and then our lead singer is Dustin Harnish. And we've been together, the five of us at this point, for the past 4 years now. And we're working on new material. We've got about 18 to 20 songs in various stages of production. We're hoping to put out at least a full-length album of about 10 to 12 songs. We may put out as much as 2 records. It just really depends on how it kind of comes together, but we're working on quite a bit of exciting material, and a lot of it very science fiction oriented. So.
Oh yeah, especially your last album, Time to Shine. And all your stuff is also available on iTunes, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, you can find our stuff on iTunes, Amazon, on our website, cdbaby.com. Pretty much all the general places you could find it.
And Dustin lives in my neck of the woods. You guys should come do a shot here in Michigan. You got fans out here. We would get at least a dozen people. Okay, maybe I don't know. Yeah, it'd be fun. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I would invite everyone to check us out next month when we review the story Coraline, which was written by the acclaimed author Neil Gaiman and turned into an animated film named Coraline, directed by Henry Selick and starred Dakota Fanning, which was one of the voices. Other than that, we would appreciate anyone to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and to write any reviews. And that's pretty much it. Follow our website. Okay. All right. Then let's say goodnight, and we'll see everyone next month. Goodbye.
Good night,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
For more information on this episode's subject matter, and to read our show notes and post your witty comments, visit us at nodeodorant.com. For more information on Ryan Sean O'Reilly and his various works of fiction, visit RyanSeanO'Reilly.com. For more information on David Wilkinson or Richard Mell, view their profiles at Goodreads.com. The theme music for this podcast was written and composed by John Doyle from the band I Decline. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope you've learned a lot. Oh, and always remember one thing. There is no deodorant in outer space.
Dole, how did you feel about the cat in the story?
The cat.
Someone's got a cat on their lap or something. It's meowing. I can hear it.
It's not me.
That'd be me.
You have 3 boys and a cat? What the fuck?
Wilk, or no, Rick.
Yeah.
Dole.
Dole.
Dole.